All right, it's 4 o'clock. Let's get started. Again, thank you everybody for joining me today for Cheese 101.1, our tasting basics. I'm very excited about this class today because this is going to be a first of a very educational series that we're doing. And actually moving forward, you'll notice that we will be naming every cheese class that we do, like 101.1, 101.2, and as we go along from now. So you'll be seeing that on our website in the future. So yeah, again, I am your host, Chelsea Fordiani. I am the cheese manager at Mollie Stones in Sausalito, as well as the resident certified cheese professional. I know I start every tasting with that information that I am a certified cheese professional. And I often get the question of like, oh, that's great. What is that? And a lot of people actually do compare it to a sommelier or a master sommelier because we do indeed have to take an exam. And this exam is administered by the American Cheese Society every year, usually in July. It coincides with their big event. They always have a yearly American Cheese Society conference, and it changes states every year. This year, of course, it's virtual. I'm not sure if it actually did happen last year, and if it did, of course, it was virtual. But the exam, it consists of 150 questions, and it lasts for, or you have to answer those questions in 3 hours. And it covers everything you could possibly think of in the cheese industry, from the milk to cheese making, to selling it, all the business behind it, the importing and exporting, all of the regulations that go into it, a huge amount of food safety information. And you have to know all of that because it's all going to be covered. And it was very, very difficult. And I think what makes it difficult is, for one thing, there isn't a set curriculum. You have to apply for taking the exam, which you have to show that you've worked at least 2,000 hours in the industry, and then you also have to, you have to fill out an application and, pay the fee and all that good stuff. And if they accept you, then you get to sit for it. And that's it. That's all they give you. They give you how much information is going to be on there. And then they're sort of like, go study. So it's all self-study. You have to be very diligent about it. But I do have to say, whether or not somebody has passed, if they have sat for it, they know a lot about cheese. And I was lucky enough to pass in 2019. And actually, my recertification is going to be coming up next year in 2022. And that you just have to show that you've worked at least 1,000 hours in the industry. And I think there's also continuing education classes that you get to take, or that you need to show that you've taken as well. So yeah, so that's what that's all about. Whenever I say, certified cheese professional, that's what that is, and that's what that means. So I am officially certified to teach you about cheese. And I'm glad that you're here today to share this with me, because this is going to be different from the other tastings that we've done, where it is going to be more technical. So before we dive in here, just a little housekeeping. If you have a question, and I love questions because they really keep me going. It makes this a lot easier because, talking to a camera and not getting any feedback, so it's a little weird. And so if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box. If you have a comment, you can throw that in the chat box. That's fine. Like if you like a cheese, don't like a cheese, if you just want to say something, say hi to somebody, you can put that in the chat box. But if you have a question that you want me to answer, you can put that in the Q&A box. And you'll see me looking over here because my computer is over here. And the questions will pop up over here. I also have my handy dandy IT director, Tim, over behind the camera, who will be answering any like logistical questions that come up, any technical things, things that he's better at answering than I am. So yeah, yay. Okay, so what you'll notice, the way there are 7 cheeses, and all of the families, they're based on moisture content or lack thereof. The families will overlap, and I'll make note of that as we're going through them. I mean, there are some cheeses that can fall into 2 different categories or can be considered, one or the other. And this is why I wanted to do a class like this, because I do get a lot of customers in who, in their head, they're thinking one thing, and then in the cheesemonger head, we're thinking something completely different. And it's not that, the customer, is incorrect or anything like that. It's just it's the lingo that, it's just different. And marketing plays a huge part of that, especially in the food industry. And sometimes it just doesn't translate to, to what the customer actually wants. So this, I wanted to do not only to give you, information and the technical stuff behind, cheese and cheese making, but also to help you when you're shopping and, you're just going in and you're just looking for something, you're not quite sure what exactly, but you have an idea in mind. When you're talking with your cheesemonger, you can both be on the same page and it'll make it easier for you. And then also, if your cheesemonger is not there, you don't freak out and you can do it on your own, which I do encourage. That is to be able to shop for cheese on your own with the proper information. So we are going to start actually with the cheese making process, so that you'll better understand what I'm talking about here and what makes the cheese what. So you start with milk. And there are 4 milks out there I'm sure there are other milks out there, but these are the 4 that are, you make cheese out of, which is cow's milk. Cow's milk is going to be the most popular because cows make the most milk. Then there's buffalo milk, goat's milk, and sheep's milk. Those are the 4 milks which you'll see, the most cheese made out retail. And so you start with milk, and then you go through the fermentation and coagulation process. And it starts by adding cultures or acid. And cultures they're a type of bacteria that when you add them to the milk, it turns the lactose, the sugar, into lactic acid. And that's what starts the separation of the solids from the liquid or the curds from the whey. With the cultures, that takes some time. With acid, and this is like citric acid or vinegar, it's immediate. And you can see this if you sometimes in baking, I remember this because I'm actually going to be making banana bread. Mom, I'm making banana bread this weekend because I got a lot of squishy bananas. And if you want to make sour milk, you just throw some vinegar into the milk because the recipe calls for sour milk. And you'll see the vinegar will separate the solids from the liquids, and that's the curds from the whey. And you'll see it's kind of feathery looking. And so that's the beginning of that process. Then with the coagulation, you want to throw in rennet, which is bacteria, traditionally bacteria from the stomach lining of the animal whose milk you're using. And that creates the coagulation of the curds to start sticking together. There is also vegetarian rennet. There's actually a myriad of them. And those, they've actually come a long way in the technology of vegetarian rennets. But before, they used to be kind of like hit or miss. Now they're a little more consistent. And that will also, or should be, labeled on your cheese as well. But you can always ask, if that is a concern of yours, whether it's animal rennet or vegetable rennet, you can definitely ask your cheesemonger. And most of the time we do have the answer. Sometimes we don't, because sometimes we ourselves do not have the ingredients list for a lot of the cheeses. But it doesn't mean we can't do some research. So you add the rennet, and that starts the coagulation, and then you can apply heat, and that has further coagulation. And so what you end up with is kind of like this big block of kind of not really cheese, but like coagulated milk. And so then you move on to the separation stage, which is cutting the curds. And cheesemakers, they'll cut the curds, and the size of the curd determines how much moisture they want in their cheese. So if the curds are large, it's going to keep a lot of moisture in, because what they're doing is that's how they're separating the curds from the whey, is the cutting of those curds. So again, the larger the curds, the more moisture is going to be in the cheese. And then the smaller the curds are, the drier the cheese is going to be in the end, because they're letting out all of that whey. And then after the separation process goes to salting and forming. And this is where cheesemakers, the stages get, it depends on their recipes. And every recipe is there. I mean, starting with the cultures, cheesemakers' recipes, it's just like baking. It's a science, and it's also an art. So the cheesemakers, like they're creating recipes, and there's secret recipes too. And they don't let people know what kind of cultures they're using and what they're, to a degree, what their methods are. When you get to the salting and forming, you can throw salt in with the curds and mix them in. Or what a lot of cheesemakers do is they'll actually form the cheese first, and then they'll soak them in a brine, which is really cool, because you see these all these little like rounds of cheese, and they're just kind of floating around in the brine. If you ever get a chance to take a tour of a cheese making facility, please do it, because it's absolutely fascinating. I know that there are a couple local ones that do it up in the Point Reyes area. So when they I think they've started doing that up again, and if not, they'll be doing it soon. I know Cowgirl Creamery definitely is one of them. So definitely check it out. I know Nicasio Valley as well. They're also another one where you can look at their cheese making processes. So that is what we've come to here, is when we've gone through that cheese making process. Now we get to the next step, which is the actual cheese. And so we're going to start with the Sorella mascarpone, which is a fresh cheese. And then also I guess I should also tell you what else you've gotten in your kit before we start diving into that. So we've also got the Rustic Bakery olive oil and celery bites. We have Castelvetrano olives, Columbus Italian dry salami, and Marcona almonds. You should have also gotten your Formaticum cheese log, and I encourage everybody to use these and to write down whether you like the cheeses or not in here, so you can develop your palate. We also, of course, have our handy dandy little Mollie Stone's worksheet here. And as we go along, feel free to, pair and match things. I'm going to be talking more about the technical parts of these cheeses and what makes them what. But please, as we go along, please feel free to try things with the different cheeses and see what you like, because pairings are always very, very important. And this is also, because another part of this was, to help you with building cheese boards, and a simple cheese board too, especially if you're in those situations where you need to be a little more economical, or if you don't know the crowd. All these cheeses and these accompaniments are good for something like that. So we'll go over that as well. So but anyway, back to the mascarpone. Which is, this is an Italian mascarpone. It's the company name is Sorella. Excuse me one moment. There's going to be a lot of talking today. It's the deal with fresh cheese, and this is what the category is. I think you can see that. Can you see that? See, also, the great thing about Tim is he's also my cameraman. There we go. Yay. so talented. So we are working on getting a little program and multiple cameras, so Tim doesn't have to, get up and move the camera around, which is very entertaining. Don't get me wrong, but we're going to try to streamline it a little better. So as we move along in the future, you may see us get a little more fancy with our camera angles. But yeah, so fresh cheese, it is ready to go the moment it's made, and that's what makes it fresh. And these are cheeses like creme fraiche, cream cheese, fromage blanc, the mascarpone. They're all in the same category. And because it's ready to go, you don't have to age it at all. You can make this stuff at home. I know we used to carry cheese making kits. I think I still can. I haven't for a while, because for a while cheese making at home was a thing, and then all of a sudden it just dropped off. And this was years ago. But if anybody's ever interested in a cheese making kit, let me know and I can bring them into my store. But what also makes a fresh cheese that has a high moisture content. It's greater than or equal to 50% moisture. So as you can see, it's a very, very soft cheese. It's spreadable. You can use it for dips. It's one of those cheeses, and also very mild. You're probably not going to find a fresh cheese that is going to be super, super strong, because it hasn't had time to age or really do anything. And also, when I'm talking about these moisture contents and percentages and everything, I don't want you to think that as cheesemongers, that's what's going on in our head all the time. It's more of a texture. That when you're saying you're looking for, when you're saying you're looking for a soft cheese, you'll see that could mean a number of things. So if you want to get more specific, if you're fresh cheese is going to be more specific to that soft cheese, especially if you're looking for something to use in a dip or something to use in cooking. This again, this is what is considered a fresh cheese. And it's typically an acid fermented cheese, which means you're throwing in citric acid or you're throwing in vinegar or something along those lines to make the separation rather than the cultures. And one of the reasons for that is cultures typically, they do take longer to create the separation, but they also add flavors depending on the cultures that you're using. They add flavors to the cheeses, and that's why you'll see more cultures being used with the harder cheeses or the ripened cheeses. So that's mascarpone for you. And I think a lot of people they associate mascarpone, of course, with tiramisu, but they also associate it as a sweeter cheese. And you can use it for either sweet or savory. And like I said, it's really good for cooking, and you can, it's actually quite versatile, and you can use it in place of butter too. It's got a lower fat content than butter. So if you're looking for a lower fat option to your butter or to cream cheese, mascarpone is always a really nice one, and it dresses up really nicely. So that's the story with fresh cheese and with mascarpone. And so the next one we'll move along to is the Tour de Mars Brie, which is this one. You actually get my gloves on here because I actually do not take all this cheese home. I give it to Tim to eat, which is why he likes doing this. It's great. But I think I should be nice and not putting my hands all over it. So this is a Tour de Mars Brie, which is a nice mug here. Yeah, here we go. Let's zoom in on there. Thank you. Yay. Oh, no, the camera. There we go. Awesome. So this is the Tour de Mars Brie. And this is going to be our soft ripened cheese. That is the next category, which is soft. It's soft ripened. And the reason it's called soft ripened is because it's been given some time to ripen, to age, and it has a rind. You'll see that white bloomy rind on the edge. And this is where we start to overlap in certain categories and certain groups, I guess you would say, because the brie is not only a soft ripened cheese, but it is also a bloomy rind cheese. And what bloomy rind means is that it has been inoculated with a mold strain. And that strain is usually either Camembert, not Camembert, Penicillium camemberti or Penicillium candidum. I'm not quite sure which strain this is, but they are very, very similar. The most popular one that I've seen is Penicillium candidum. That's probably the one that is on this one, because again, it tends to be on most of the bloomy rind cheese that I carry. And we've got a question from Jim. Hi, Jim. Does water content correlate with longevity? Yes, it does. The more moisture is going to be in your cheese, the less time it's going to be able to sit around in your refrigerator, which you don't really want it to sit in your refrigerator all that long anyway. So yes, because of moisture, certain bacteria really enjoy hanging out in moisture. So you will see things grow a lot quicker if you were to say to just let the mascarpone hang out in your fridge. It also will collect flavors more easily from your fridge too. So don't let it hang out next to something like really garlicky or anything like that. But yes, that is correct. It does have to do with the longevity. So thank you for that question, Jim. So yeah, back to my bloomy brie. Yes, so the Penicillium candidum, this is what causes that white rind on the outside. And you can see here too that sometimes it gets onto the inside of the cheese, and that's okay. You get little striations there. That's fine. Same thing. Doesn't mean that the cheese has gone bad or anything. I get that question all the time about mold on cheese. And the rule of thumb, for the most part, is if there is white mold or blue or greenish mold on your cheese, it's fine. You can cut it off or you can eat it. It's up to you. It doesn't mean that the cheese has gone bad. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to make you sick. It is actually the same strain that you find in blue cheese, which we will get to. There are times where if your cheese is completely overrun with mold, it's not going to be very enjoyable. It probably has created a completely different cheese. But for the most part, yes, if you get a mold spot or two on your cheese, it doesn't mean it has met its maker. So don't worry too much about that. See, this is what happens when I, with classes like this, I go off on tangents and stuff like that. So hopefully you're okay with that. But the soft ripened cheese also has a higher moisture content, but it has a rind. And it's going to be a similar moisture content to the fresh cheese, which is 50% or more moisture. However, what sets it apart is this white rind. So, mascarpone, fresh cheese, no rind. Brie, soft ripened cheese, because there's a rind. So that is the biggest difference between those two soft cheeses. And this can take, a soft ripened cheese can take days or weeks to ripen, or again, like the fresh cheese, it can be ready in a matter of moments. So this does take a little time. And you'll also see, soft ripened cheeses that do not have a rind because they haven't been given time to develop them, even if they have been inoculated with the mold strain like Penicillium candidum or Camberti. Marin French company breakfast cheese. That is a perfect example of a soft ripened cheese that hasn't developed a rind yet. But if you were to throw that into your refrigerator and let that sit for a while, eventually it would develop a white rind around it. And if any of you have ever had the cheese before, you'll notice that if you were to let that sit, and then you decided to eat it with the rind on it, you'd see that it would have become a lot creamier on the inside. Whereas a breakfast cheese, just straight out of the case, that'll be a little more spongy in texture, a little more chalky, And again, no white wine rind around it, but it does have the mold strain. So again, more information. Yay. Also, I know people have also come across triple cream. Triple creams also fall into this category of these soft ripened cheeses. And what makes a triple cream means it is at least 70% fat in dry matter. And what that means is if you were to remove all of the moisture from the cheese, the matter that you are left with, if 70% of it is fat, that makes it a triple cream. But usually these things are labeled. It's not like we're draining all the moisture from cheese and then figuring that stuff out. But yeah, so that's, when you see, and it's the same, you'll see like double cream or single cream and stuff like that. Double cream and single cream, those, I feel like those are, I'm sure there are technical measurements for those, but really I feel as though they're more of a marketing thing. Triple cream is something where it's like it has to be 70%. A double cream, you'll probably see anything from 60 to 62%. But yeah, if you're looking for a really creamy, really decadent cheese, triple cream is really, and you're not worried about caloric intake either. Yeah, definitely go for a triple cream. So we're moving right along. The next two categories I will be addressing, you will notice that they will overlap. The first one is semi-soft cheese, and the other one is semi-hard cheese. And you can see where these can, because that's another one I get as well. Somebody will come in, I want a semi-soft cheese. And what I pick out for them is too soft. And it's the same thing with semi-hard. It's the same thing. So we'll go over on what makes what. So semi-soft cheese, my example here is the red wax Gouda. And this is from Holland, cow's milk. And you'll see it's in a red wax. Don't eat the wax. I'm sure you could, but it's not going to be very tasty. It doesn't add anything to the cheese. So remove it. So you'll see what makes this semi-soft. Again, the moisture content is going to be, it's greater than 34%, but less than 50%. So between 34% and 50%, anywhere that falls in there. And the similar cheeses are Jarlsberg, raclette. Raclette's a really good example. Havarti, that's another one. And you can see, that it's kind of wiggly. There is some, and that's due to the casein. Casein's a very interesting, that's a milk protein. And you have to think of it as a sponge, kind of the casein matrix, which gives, that sort of flexibility there. Because that's, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the casein, milk protein, if you think about it as a sponge where you've got all this matrix of holes, kind of like that. My fingers would be the protein chains, and then in between would be all of the liquid all the way. So actually when you add heat to it, and because that's why the cheeses like this, semi-soft and semi-hard cheeses, they're good melting cheeses. When you apply heat, it kind of what's the word? It's kind of upsets the chains a little bit, and that's why you get it stretching, and that's what causes the stretching and good melting, like they're good grilled cheese and fondue cheeses. This is the semi-hard and the semi-soft cheeses. It's because that's what it does to the casein proteins, because you have that balance of protein and moisture. And really melting cheeses, that could be an entirely different class. So I won't get too far into it. But let's see here. So the Gouda or the semi-soft cheese, this can take weeks to months to ripen. So again, longer time. And that's another thing that you'll notice with these is what makes these categories different is the amount of time that they've been given to sit and the moisture has been let away. So when we're moving on to the semi-hard cheese, which is the manchego here, which is a sheep's milk, you'll notice that, yeah, it's going to have a little bit of flexibility there, but it is going to be a little drier. You see it will, it does crumble a little more than the Gouda here. The Gouda is, it's still got some flex to it because it's got more moisture in it. And so that's why this is a semi-hard cheese. And the semi-hard, the moisture content, again, that gap gets smaller. It's between 34 and 39% moisture. So again, a little drier than the semi-soft cheese. Again, it's also, these cheeses are also good for melting, but again, this is where these cheeses kind of overlap, or these categories kind of overlap. The 3-month manchego, this would melt just fine. Probably not as well as the Gouda, but still there's enough moisture in it where it would melt very nicely. If you're getting to like a 12-month manchego, which has had more time to release more moisture, then it's probably not going, it's going to be stronger, but it's not going to melt as well as, say, the 3-month manchego. Although I have to say, I haven't melted manchego all that often on anything. I usually just snack on it. But I'm sure it would actually be a good, it would actually probably be really good in eggs or quiche. That sounds like a good thing. I'm going to take a little drink here. Well, I hope all of you are enjoying the information. The semi-hard cheese will take months to years to ripen. And again, there we've got the, a longer period of ripening, more moisture let away. Another tidbit about the manchego is that it is a legally protected cheese, meaning that it has you'll often see on a label, it'll say PDO, DO, DOP, AOP, or AOC. Those are all acronyms in all different languages that mean protected designation of origin. So I know Roquefort was the first cheese. I think it was 1934. I have to double check on that one, but it was a very long time ago. Roquefort was the first legally protected cheese. And what it means is the method in which the cheese is made, the kind of milk that's made out of, where it comes from, however long it's aged, everything that encompasses that cheese making process, and where it comes from. That is the only way it can be made and the only place where it can come from. It's the same thing like champagne and sparkling wine. Roquefort can only come out of Roquefort. Same thing with manchego. Manchego can only come from the sheep of the Manchega sheep, and it can only come out of Spain. I do know that there's a Mexican manchego, but it's nothing like this manchego, and it actually has to be called queso manchego. So if you were to make a cheese here well, I'm in Greenberry right now, but if you were to make a cheese right here in California and try to call it manchego, you would get sued and you would lose. So yeah, there are a number of cheeses that are legally protected, and again, usually they're labeled like that. Gruyere is another great example of legally protected cheese. Can only be from Switzerland, and made in certain ways by certain makers. I know that the Greeks are trying to get feta a legally protected cheese, which is going to be really difficult because feta is so largely used as marketing for a cheese name. I also halloumi actually just got legal protection in Cyprus. You can only get halloumi from Cyprus, and I think maybe one other area, but that is relatively new. So it's constantly changing, and cheesemakers are constantly trying to get their cheese recipes, legally protected. And Jim, are any American cheeses protected? Not that I know of. We're a little different here in America. It's more of a copyright infringement than it is cheesemaking process. I don't know if I'm going to have to look into that because I don't know if things have evolved. It's actually more of been American cheesemakers taking the names from European cheeses and trying to sell them as their own. Again, you'll notice that with our, when you're looking at labels for Kraft singles. Jim, come on. Kraft singles aren't cheese. So I love my customers. I really do. So yeah, a great example is there is camembert. Camembert is actually it's a source of contention for the French, most definitely. You'll see American camemberts all over the place. Actually, Marin French Cheese Company, they make an excellent camembert. I love their camembert. It's fantastic. There's also a 3-milk camembert that I carry that's from Italy. And this is a great story. So the Italians came out with this 3-milk camembert. It's a cow, goat, and sheep combination, really delicious. And the French were livid that the Italians were calling it camembert. So they're like, no, you can't do that. You can't call it camembert. Camembert is our name. And we're going to sue you. And the Italians, of course, said, well, go ahead and sue us. Well, because camembert is in itself is not a legally protected name. There are camemberts that are legally protected. Camembert de Normandie is a legally protected name. So again, if you were going to make a cheese and try to sell it as Camembert de Normandie, you would get sued and you would lose because that name is legally protected. So it's constantly evolving, and I really don't know if any American cheeses have applied for protected status. Because I don't know if we actually have that as a problem again, because if a lot of the American cheeses, a lot of times they have very, very clever names. So, and it's a copyright thing. So, you could get sued for a copyright infringement instead of, cheese making infringement. I don't know, is that a thing? Cheese theft. Yeah. So, but that's an excellent question. I'm actually going to look into that. So wonderful, wonderful questions. Ending with the semi-hard cheese, and other examples of semi-hard cheese are Gruyere, Comté. A lot of Swiss mountain cheeses actually are very, very good examples. Appenzeller is another one. Again, you'll also notice that density is a big thing too. So there's that. And so moving right along to our hard grating cheese, I've got the Parmigiano Reggiano, which also is a protected cheese, legally protected cheese. This one, a Parmesan cow's milk, has to be raw cow's milk and must be aged at least 24 months minimum. There has been, I have been told that there is a Reggiano out there that is only 18 months, which is something I do have to look into because that is a relatively new thing. That is something that has come up. I know Grana Padano, which is another Parmesan, that only has to be aged 18 months. But as far as I know, Parmigiano Reggiano has to be aged at least 24 months. So what makes a hard grating cheese is that it has less than 34% moisture, less than or equal to 34% moisture. So again, very dry, very crumbly. It's again, this is again what separates the hard grating cheese from the semi-hard cheese. Again, that has less moisture content in it. And it's also better. It is better for grating too. There are often times where I do get a question. Well, I do get asked if I can grate cheese, and no, I can't because I don't have a grater. Because when we did the remodel at Sausalito, it went missing. So that's one reason I can't grate cheese. But I would get requests to grate like a cheddar, and you can shred a cheddar, but it's one of those things where you need, like, it depends on the cheddar and it depends on the moisture content. But a lot of times what happens, if there's too much moisture in the cheese, it'll get stuck in the grating holes and it'll just clump and it'll just be terrible. And that's why grating, harder cheeses like Parmesan, it's a lot more successful that way. You could also use a box cutter too if you wanted to, or a box cutter or box grater, if you want, for shredding cheese. But again, if you notice, like when you're using that box grater, if you're using like a cheese like a Gouda and you're, like making or shredding that cheese for pizza or something like that, you'll notice that it's a little harder and it sticks to the box grater. Months to years ripening for this as well. You can go several years, in fact. I'm thinking, what's the longest? I think the longest aged cheese I've ever seen is like a 7-year cheddar that we had. I think we carried a 7-year. I know that can get, it can get way longer than that. There was a story, this is a while back, where some grocery store or restaurant or something had closed down and they found a block of cheddar in their walk-in, which I don't know how this happens, but it was like 40 years old or something like that. And it was actually still okay. But I can only imagine it was probably really, really strong and really bitter. And that's what happens over time is, as cheeses age, there's a point where they just start getting bitter. Another good example of a hard grating cheese, Pecorino Romano, which is also a good alternative to Parmigiano Reggiano, only it's made out of sheep's milk. And that's what pecorino means in Italian, roughly, is sheep's milk cheese. Pecorino cannot come from anywhere else. It has to come from Italy because pecorino literally means sheep's milk cheese. And there's a whole family of pecorinos too. So that's another question I get a lot. People coming in, they're like, I want pecorino. And I'm like, what kind of pecorino would you like? And they kind of look at me like, and I'm like, no, I'm being serious, because there are several types of pecorinos. There are really young pecorinos and there are really old pecorinos. The most popular one is Romano, because that's what people use instead of Parmigiano Reggiano. But there's Pecorino Dolces, which are very young. They're a little sweeter. They're a little more buttery. You can slice them. They're actually kind of like the Gouda here, only they're made out of sheep's milk. I could do an entire class on pecorinos. I really could. So that's your hard grating cheese there. I'll take a little moment, a little water, and then we're going to move on to the wash rind, which is one of my favorite categories. So Morbier is my example, which is sticking to the board right now, of my wash rind cheese. And you'll see the wash rind has kind of this like orangey pink rind, and then this stripe, I always get questions about this stripe there. So Morbier, traditional Morbier, is it's a cow's milk that has vegetable ash in the center. And back in the day, the vegetable ash was used to separate the morning milking from the afternoon milking. I guess it would depend on where your Morbier is coming from, because Morbier, it's become a lot more popular and a lot more readily accessible in the United States, but cheesemakers in France have also changed their techniques with Morbier to get their Morbier into the United States, because for a while there, and I don't know if it's still a source of contention, but the FDA did not like foreign vegetable ash in cheese. It saw it as a food allergen. So we lost a lot of really good cheeses and that we were not able to bring back in. And one of them was traditional Morbier. What you see in the center here, if you got the cheese from us, it's Morbier, but it's also called Montbrias, because it's not vegetable ash that's in the center. It's actually, grape extract, which doesn't have a flavor. It doesn't taste like grapes at all. It just gives it that color that you're used to with Morbier without being vegetable ash, and it doesn't freak out the FDA. Sometimes it's just too much of a pain to try to get cheeses through. And so, yeah, they changed their ways. And it's really unfortunate because, I mean, really, the traditional real Morbier is absolutely delicious. I mean, this is fantastic. I think this cheese is awesome in itself, this Morbier. We'll going back to the wash drying category, what we're talking about here is a wash drying cheese. It's like a semi-soft or semi-hard cheese where it has between 34 and 50% moisture. And it takes days to years for ripening. But what makes it different is that this rind here, this orangey rind here, cheesemakers spray their cheeses with a brine, and it creates this bacteria called Brevibacterium linens. Sometimes the bacteria is in the brine that they spray with. Other times it's allowed to bloom naturally. Another great example is our own Red Hawk from Cowgirl Creamery, which they make in the Point Reyes area, and they can only make in the Point Reyes area. They've tried making it at their Petaluma facility, and they couldn't get the Brevibacterium linens to bloom. So that's why they make the majority of their Mount Tam. Actually, I think they make all their Mount Tam up in Petaluma and all their Red Hawk in Point Reyes, because it can only be made in Point Reyes. And also, if you've noticed, because we are having distribution issue, or not distribution issues, just sometimes the Red Hawk, we have trouble getting it in because their facility in Point Reyes is very small and the demand for Red Hawk is really high. So every so often we'll have shortages, and right now I can only get one case a week if I can get my hands on it. So it's a very delicious cheese, very, very stinky cheese. And that's also the Brevibacterium linens, or B linens for short. It creates this very stinky, smelly feet smell. And what's interesting about that is it also is related to the smell that creates foot odor. So that is why a lot of people associate cheese smelling like stinky feet. But it tastes really good. I can't imagine that it tastes like stinky feet. That just sounds horrible. Also, what's great about the Brevibacterium linens is that it prevents other more aggressive molds from forming. So you'll see the outside rinds of these wash drying cheeses, they'll be kind of like this sticky, orangey, texture and color. So yeah, really cool. And another great example of a wash rind is Taleggio. That's another one of my favorites. Epoisse, that's another real beautiful one, and that is actually one of my husband's favorites. That one's washed in a pomace, which is the liqueur from the second pressing of grape skins. And I usually have it during the holidays, and it's absolutely gorgeous. One of those cheeses where you just break open into it and you just, shovel it into your mouth. It's absolutely wonderful. So that's the story with Morbier and washed rind cheeses. And then the last category, and our strongest category, is blue cheese, blue vein cheeses. And this one I have Danish blue, which is it's a really well-priced blue, and it's really versatile too. It's just got enough moisture into it. Blue cheeses have less than 46% moisture, which is a very specific number. But you'll see, soft blues and harder blues. They run the gamut. This one, it crumbles really nicely, and you can use it in salad dressings. It crumbles really well in salads, and of course, snacking. Really good with honey. Blue cheeses pair really well with honey because that's sweet and salty. Very, very, very nice. And again, weeks to months for ripening. And the mold strain in here, the two most popular ones are Penicillium roqueforti and Penicillium glaucum. Penicillium roqueforti, you're going to see more than glaucum. The reason for that, I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to guess that Penicillium roqueforti is probably easier to maintain and control. And there are different methods to adding the mold strain to your blue cheese. Some cheesemakers will hand mix it into the curd. Others, will just, pierce it. But also the piercing typically is to aerate the cheese, because the mold, it grows with oxygen. And actually, you'll see, Tim, if I can use your cameraman skills, you see that line there, that's where it's been pierced. So you can see needles have gone in there, and you can also see on the back end there where the needles have gone into. So you'll know that your cheese has been pierced and aerated that way instead of hand aerated. And that's how your mold has gotten in there. And mold growth, or air is required for mold growth. If you didn't have any of that, you wouldn't have any of those blue veins in there. Then the different mold strains and the different cultures, they create those different flavors in the blue cheeses. And like I said, when you find spots on blue cheeses that aren't supposed to be blue cheeses, that's okay. That's what happens there. It's all that wonderful microflora. So that's the end of our little journey through the different categories of cheeses. Is Stilton? Hi, Jim. This is another question from Jim. Is Stilton cheese the same, and is it a protected name? Yes, it is. Stilton, yes, Stilton is a blue cheese. It is a type of blue cheese, and yes, I am 99% sure it is protected, but it's actually not made in Stilton. It is made somewhere else, and I can't remember where that somewhere else is, but it is in England. But yeah, Gorgonzola, again, another blue cheese. Let's see here. We've got our Point Reyes blue, of course. Cabrales, Spanish Cabrales, that's another blue cheese. So yeah, it's, blue, or Roquefort. Roquefort is probably one of the most popular blue cheeses. So blue cheeses do have different names. They're not all just called blue cheese. There are a lot out there. We're almost there. And so, again, if there are any questions, please, please roll them on in. And then I was going to go over using these for a cheese board. I can do that really quickly. I'm not going to assemble anything here, but I'm just going to give you some tips on how to assemble something, for a crowd. Or when you're, thinking about certain situations. Again, like I said, all these cheeses would serve very well at any sort of event, and everybody is going to be, happy with them. You're not going to change anybody's life, but you're not going to disappoint, certainly not. And they all present very well too, and they're also, all very well priced. So they all offer us something a little different. And usually, like it depends on a lot of things. And usually when people come in and they're looking for a cheese board, I will ask them a whole number of questions to figure out what would work best. And I ask how many people, well, what's the occasion, if anything else is going to be eaten, if you're drinking anything in particular. And also what I think is my most important question is, how adventurous is your crowd? Because that, at the end of the day, really does matter. If you don't know your crowd, or if your crowd is not adventurous at all, these are actually great cheeses to go with because they don't offend. The blue cheese might, and the Morbier might, but the Morbier isn't like too overly pungent that it's going to freak people out. Blue cheese, people they love it or they hate it. It's the same thing like goat cheese; they love it or they hate it. So you're not going to go wrong. And if I'm serving a larger crowd, I will usually go with 3 larger chunks of cheeses. If I'm serving a smaller crowd, and I want people to kind of taste different things, and usually if it's a smaller crowd, these people better, I'll go with like 5 smaller pieces of cheese. But always go with odd numbers. Odd numbers look better on a board than even numbers. I don't know why, they just do. It just the aesthetic of it. It just lends itself much nicer on a board than an even number of cheeses. Not that you're gonna, not that you're gonna get in trouble for having an even number of cheeses. That's just aesthetic. And then, excuse me. Ooh, let me get some water here. And then when you're thinking about how much you're going to consume, that's where the question of, how many people are you going to serve, and are you eating anything else? So what you want to think about is, if you are going to be eating something else, think about it's 1 ounce per cheese per person. It's 1 ounce per cheese per person. If you're going to be eating dinner. But if this is the only thing that you're serving, then you want to double or triple that, depending on if these are heavy eaters or not. So 2 to 3 ounces per cheese per person. I would usually go with 2 ounces per person, because you'll have accompaniments, crackers, olives, nuts, fruit. The stone fruits are in, and they're really good right now. I just had some really good nectarines the other day from Mollie's, which are fantastic. So highly recommend those. And of course, salami. I'm very proud of this. I pulled up Pinterest and I made a salami rose, which is really interesting. It's very easy to do. You can YouTube it or you can Pinterest it, and you can make your salami all fancy. Because I've noticed salami roses are very popular on charcuterie trays on Instagram these days. So yeah, you can, but you don't have to do that really. If you just lay out cheese on a board with some accompaniments, people will love you anyway. So yeah, those are my tips and tricks for a simple cheese board, breaking it down a little bit for you. Yeah, and we seem like we're at the end of our session. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And please, if there are any, we do have a few more minutes. So if you have any more questions, please, throw them my way. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mom. I'm glad you like the salami roast. My mom is so proud. But yeah, please. And then also, if there's something that does pop into your head, and you're like, oh, I should have answered, or should have asked that question, you can always email me your questions at Chelsea@molliestones.com. That's CHELSEA, like the English football team. That's at molliestones.com. I was actually named after the Chelsea Town Hall in Chelsea, London, because that's where my parents were married. So yeah, you learned something about me. So yeah, and if you like this, again, I do this every month, and next month we will be featuring Penny Royal, who is a new cheesemaker we are carrying. They make some really beautiful sheep and goat's milk cheeses. So yeah, looking forward to that. That one is going to be I think it's the 22nd of June. Don't quote me on that one. But yeah, that's going to be our next one. Will be Penny Royal. So be on the lookout for that. You'll see it at molliestones.com/events, as you always do. And I put together a really fun cheese kit with that one. There's going to be honeycomb in that one. I'm very, very excited. So yeah. So thank you. Oh, when did you know you wanted to be a cheesemonger? Cheryl, thank you. I actually didn't. This is my 14th year with Mollie Stones. And I actually ended up here because I just needed a job. I had just graduated. So I went to culinary school, and I also went to San Francisco State and I finished my journalism degree at San Francisco State after finishing culinary school, and I needed a job. So I actually applied for the wine position, which by the time they got back to me, that was already filled. So they asked if I wanted to be a deli clerk, and I was just like, whatever. So I actually ended up interviewing with Mike Stone, and he wanted to know if I knew anything about cheese. And I said, well, I probably know more since I went to culinary school, but they needed somebody at Sausalito to, help manage the cheese department. And so here I am 14 years later. So a lot I've learned from working at Mollie's, and it's been a really fun world to work in. And I do totally love it. And yes, Mike Stone is still very much alive. He actually might be watching right now. I don't know. And then Carolyn, hi Carolyn. Let's see, cheese for, do you pair sweets and sweet and salty with specific cheeses, or just put on the board and let guests do the work? I usually just let guests do the work. I'll pick out things that I like, and I'll let the guests go to it. But I will make suggestions as to what would go with what. Like if I had an herb cheese in there, I probably wouldn't be like, oh, hey, you should have, have honey with it. You don't want honey like with an herb cheese. I think that would be kind of weird. But sometimes when I do a board, sometimes I will place accompaniments like kind of next to those cheeses to, kind of make it a suggestion. But I always think it's probably easier for guests, especially if they're a little like, oh, I don't know. It's probably more comfortable for them if you just kind of lay everything out for them and let them just sort of have at it, and let them be comfortable with experimenting with different things. And sometimes you find some really fun pairings that way too that you would never have thought about. So yeah.
What's the most expensive cheese
ever? The most expensive cheese I've ever eaten. Ooh. Oh, I've got to think about this one. Actually, I think it might have been the Rogue River Blue. I think at this point, that may be what it is, which I do carry when it comes out during the holidays. It's from Rogue Creamery, which is up in Oregon, and it comes out every September, and I have to pre-order for it. And it is a raw cow's milk blue cheese that is wrapped in grape leaves that are soaked in organic pear brandy from the region, and it is amazing. And I think that one retails for $70 a pound on average. So yeah, I think that is. Vacheron Mont d'Or might be another one, but I think the Rogue River Blue takes the cake on that one. I think there may have been one other that we carried that was really, I can't think of it now. Anyway, yeah, if that one actually won world's best cheese in 2019, and it was through the Rogue River Blue. And what made that so special is that it was the first American cheese to win that award ever. That competition has been going on for over 30 years now. And it was the first American cheese to win that award. And this is going up against literally the world of cheese. And what's also great about that, it's right in our backyard. So we got a chance to try it, and we, on a regular basis. Whereas a lot of the cheeses that win that award, we can't even import into the United States, either because of the methods or because it's a small batch, and the distribution isn't nearly enough. So yeah, that's a little claim to fame for the West Coast, the Rogue River Blue. Yeah. So that was a half pound. Okay, all right. When it comes in, sure, I'll put a half pound for you. So yeah, all right. There we go. So 5 o'clock, here we are. Thank you so much for joining us, and please join me next time. Thank you, Tim, for all of your IT skills and all of your cameraman skills. Really appreciate that. And yeah, we'll see you next month for Penny Royal. So thank you. I'll see you later. Bye.